In this show, we balance so much between politics and religion and everything Israel, everything that's hard about Israel, everything that's fun about Israel. And our next guest is somebody who does a great job explaining Israel. He does such a great job because of the way he speaks with calm and yet with passion. It's not easy to mix calm and passion, right? You got to be on the one hand calm. On the other hand, if you're totally calm and you're like an icy river, that doesn't do it either. His name is Jonathan Conricus. He is all over television. He's Swedish Israeli. He's sweet, but he's Swedish Israeli. He was the international spokesman for the IDF for many years. And today he's a senior fellow at the think tank, which is called Foundation for Defense of Democracies, based in D.C. He is based in Israel, but he's always flying around. Jonathan Conricus joins us. Shalom, Jonathan.
Shalom, Yishai. Good evening.
Where am I catching you now? Can you tell me?
Actually, home in central Israel.
Very good. Okay, very good. Jonathan, tell me a little bit about where you've been in the last few weeks. You really helped defend Israel throughout the world, and I know you're always flying around. Last week we couldn't catch each other. Tell me about your travels and what people are asking, what people want to hear and understand.
Yeah, I've made it thank you for having me on, Yishai. It's a pleasure. I've seen your show, watched it on YouTube, and I think there's lots of interesting content in it, and I'm happy to be here.
Today.
I would say that, I've been traveling all around North America and Europe. That's where I've been focusing. So Canada, US, UK, and other parts of Europe, reaching out to Jewish communities, reaching out to people who are interested in getting an update of, beyond the news of what's going on in Israel, meeting people of different faiths, by the way, not only Jewish people, but Christians. There are so many people around the world who are not represented in international or American media, who love Israel, who care about Israel, who are very fond of Israel and the Jewish people, and sometimes struggle to express that because many times their views are censored. So there's a lot of love for Israel that isn't usually reflected in international media. And I have the good fortune of meeting a lot of people through various beautiful organizations that ask me to come and speak. Last 2 weeks, I was in Canada, US, and the UK, speaking on behalf of various organizations and hopefully reaching out to people and helping them understand the complexity of the situation and what they're not getting in the news.
Okay.
The topics, Yishai.
Yeah, what's really bugging people out there?
I mean, number one is hostages. That is really what is at, I think, the top of the list of questions. It's a close call between hostages, what's going on, when are we going to see our 101 brothers and sisters home? And the second question is a lot about October 7. How did it happen, and how could the ever-powerful Israeli defense establishment have failed so badly and allowed Hamas to do what they did, the atrocities that they did on October 7? Those are the two most prominent questions. And then, since I come from the world of information warfare and speaking and public relations, people also want to share their opinion about how Israel is doing or how poorly official Israel is doing when it comes to making its own case in international media. Some people refer to that as hasbara. I usually speak about public relations or public affairs or public diplomacy, and there's lots of discussions of that, but those are the three most important topics.
Okay, so just in a short answer, let's not talk. I'm not going to talk about the hostages or Israeli PR, although that's something you're definitely an expert in. But how do you answer the question about how did Israel get caught with its pants down and got attacked on a holy day in Israel? Our army seemingly did not catch this terrorist attack, which had been planned for a long time, and which was we were duped. We fell for it. And a lot of people were killed, murdered, and raped, and all the bad stuff. How do you answer that question?
Yeah, without being too graphic, I'd say that not only were our pants down, we were caught with our pants down, they weren't even in the same room. That's how bad the situation was. I think that it goes, there's still no official Israeli board of inquiry. It hasn't been investigated at the military level, at a sufficient level. This hasn't been presented to Israeli decision makers. And the Israeli government hasn't come clean yet on all of those years of Israeli policy towards Gaza. I would give you my personal point of view based on my insight into Israeli affairs and a lot of investigative journalistic reports that I've read. And I'd say the following. One, and the most important thing is that we underestimated our enemy and we totally misinterpreted their strategic intentions. We actually stopped listening to what our enemies were saying. And when Hamas were saying loud and clear in Arabic that they want to annihilate the state of Israel and that they want to destroy and kill all the Jews, they weren't talking about the Gaza Strip. They were not talking about the Gaza peripheral area, the Gaza envelope. They're talking about all of Israel, which they refer to as Palestine. And we simply didn't listen. We didn't listen to what they were saying. We didn't heed the warning signs, which were there, and some parts of the Israeli defense establishment saw it and tried to sound the alarm bells. But those voices were stifled and told to be quiet. And we didn't watch the different signs that we saw of actually Hamas preparing to do what they did on October the 7th. And it all goes back to our misunderstanding of what we thought their intentions were and what we thought was what Hamas was about. Then on top of that, of course, we have to speak about the level, the availability of troops around the Gaza division. Most of the troops were on other assignments. There were no readily available reserve units. There were not enough helicopters ready to deploy at Air Force bases. And the general assessment was that, well, nothing's going to happen because we've built this wall underground defending us from tunnels. We have a strong and sturdy fence above ground, which we don't think that they're going to be able to cross. And we have the Iron Dome capable of shooting down the biggest and the baddest rockets that they can fire. So why worry? And I think this was the general sentiment in Southern Command Gaza Division.
And there was one more, which is that we have on record a chief of military intelligence saying, we think that Hamas is more into governance than into fighting Israel. They are deterred. They want to govern. It's not that they want peace or love Israel, but they want to stay in their place and in their lane and get the benefits of being legitimate governors of a chunk of land of Gaza. And we just don't expect there to be a war. So there was also what we call in Israel a conceptia, a conception of the strategic dangers that was not commensurate with the reality.
Yeah, you're correct. I agree. The paradigm of thought was that, yes, Hamas is deterred. And as I said in the beginning, the really basic primal issue was that we misinterpreted their strategic intentions and we also underestimated their capacity. We didn't understand what they were doing. We told ourselves that what we were seeing wasn't actually what was happening. And we failed to take notice of the warning signs. And yes, Hamas, for at least 2 years, probably more than that, effectively misled Israeli decision makers, military and political, into thinking that Hamas was into the business of governing Gaza, getting work permits for Palestinian workers to work in Israel, and getting Qatari money with Israeli authorization into the Gaza Strip. And
Right.
as if that was the most important thing, but apparently it wasn't. And Hamas, for all of those years, was very busy building military infrastructure, preparing its troops, preparing its murderers to come across into Israel, digging tunnels, hoarding weapons that they all were able to smuggle in through Egypt, which the entire Israeli defense establishment knew about, Israeli military and Israeli government, including the prime minister and many various ministers of defense. We all knew that these tunnels were open and
Right.
nothing was done about it when it comes to Egypt. So there are so many questions that are being asked by people around the world who care, who look up and ask, well, how could this have happened? You know, we trusted the IDF, we trusted the Israeli defense establishment after having such a stellar record of defending against various enemies. How could this have happened? And I think that's the very big issue that Israel will have to analyze and do a lot of soul searching, military and government, hopefully. And I think we owe it. We owe it to the people who were murdered, the people who were butchered, and to the general loss of security and a sense of security amongst Israelis. We owe it to them to be better and to make sure that we learn from what happened. And, you know, not so much about blame and not so much about political processes, but just that we just learn from it at the military level and at the political level, never to be fooled again and never to let our guard down and always listen to what our enemies are saying that their intentions are. And this is very relevant today. You look at the Iranians today, the Iranian regime, you only have to listen carefully at what they're saying and what they're planning to do. And the issue here with Iran is that their outspoken goal is to annihilate the state of Israel. And it's not just talk, it's not just bluster. This is an official program of the Iranian regime. They're counting down from the year 2040. That's the target date that they're aiming for. And I think that they're very serious in their endeavors. And I wouldn't want us to repeat the mistakes that we did with misinterpreting Hamas's lethal intentions or genocidal intentions against Israel and doing the same thing with Iran. And I think this is now where we are. A year and a month after the war started, after Hamas attacked Israel, and after the rest of the Iranian proxies tried to attack Israel and did so, what we now are, the crossroads that we are at now, is to understand that this is the future of the conflict and this is really the source of our insecurity, and that it is upon us now to change our strategy to deal with it better.
Jonathan, that was a great answer. And I think the greatness of that answer is that you also showed Israeli vulnerability and without covering it up. There was a failure. It cost lives. And I think when you talk like that, a lot of times audiences can relate to it much better. Instead of a kind of bluster, a kind of bravado, a kind of hubris, you know, we know exactly what's going on. It's like, no, we failed and the other side did very well. But here's the follow-up question to that. The question is going to be at the end of my little words is going to be, how are we really doing? On the one hand, Israel's fought a very strong war and has showed a lot of people that Israel is never leaving, knows how to push back, knows how to kill terrorists, knows how to not crumple up and go away and become chaff and blow in the wind. We're standing strong against our bullies. That's for sure. And a lot of people recognize that. I think a lot of people in America recognize that. There's a pride. There's a Jewish pride. I've seen a lot of people tell me that they're prouder now to wear their kippah or whatever outward Jewish sign that they have than before, because they're proud of the IDF. They're proud of being part of it. And there's more of an internal sense, Israeli sense of cohesion. That we're with our soldiers. And Israel's back in the fight, and Israeli troops are now, you know, battle tested, battle experienced. There's a strength. But on the other hand, if you're a bad guy, if you hate Israel, you could say to yourself, look, Israel was struck very hard. They have a lot of internal divisions. They've lost a lot of land because their communities around the Gaza periphery have been destroyed and not really rebuilt yet. And so too in the north of Israel, normative communities like Kiryat Shmona are empty. Haifa's under attack. The rockets that right under their noses, we acquired and stockpiled are now firing. Israel's economy is practically shut down in terms of, look, there's barely airplanes flying except for El Al and a few others. Israel's practically an island now that you can't get to, or if you pay an El Al ticket, it's exorbitant prices. And Israel is not in great shape, actually, and we're winning. And then they'll turn to a latest video from Al Jazeera called Israelism, which blames Israel for everything and has 700,000 views in 4 weeks. And they're like, look, we're winning the propaganda narrative war as well. So I'm turning to you and asking, if you were to tell us the temperature, if you was to tell us the health of the state of Israel internationally, but first in terms of its battle and also in terms of its international standing, how's our standing doing? What's the credit rating that you would give us?
Yeah, so that will take a few minutes to answer, and I'll break it down into different components. Let's start with Tachlis, reality on the ground first. Even though in this age that we live in, sometimes spins and virtual reality are more important than the actual reality on the ground, but I think we should start with the battlefield. So the battlefield, when you look at Gaza, I would say that Hamas is down, not out yet, but very much down. Most of its military capacities have been eliminated by Israel. They are not an active fighting force. They do not have the ability to threaten Israeli civilians, and they have extremely limited military capacity left to fight in a few pockets, Sajaiya and Jabalia, maybe a little bit also in the central part of Khan Yunis. Other than that, and except for the fact that they're still holding on to 101 Israeli hostages, they are not in great shape, and the Gaza Strip is in horrible shape as a result of what Hamas did and the ensuing fighting. Unfortunately, Hamas has not been defeated yet because Israel has not been able to, and this is mostly at the political level, to present an alternate political system that will govern the Gaza Strip.
Right.
And coming short of doing it ourselves, as in having Israeli troops occupying the Gaza Strip, and I'm using the dreaded O word, which many people around the world are kind of a bit cagey about, but to actually occupy the Gaza Strip and administer food and medical provisions and actually control it, that is what Israel has not done yet. And until Israel does, Hamas will still be in power, and Israel will not have achieved either of its three goals: one, to dismantle its military capabilities; two, to dismantle their administrative capabilities; and three, to get the hostages back. So that's the situation in the south.
Just one parenthesis for, just to make a comment on what you're saying. Absolutely correct analysis. On this show, from my perspective and my opinionated perspective, Israel should control the Gaza Strip and can deal with the 2 million people there. We can administer medicine. We can do food. Yes, we can control it like as we did before, and I think that's the way forward personally. I don't think anybody else is going to do it for us. Not the UAE, not the Americans, not the international community, and certainly not the PA or the Hamas. And I agree with you that when you say all day long, we're going to do everything, we're not going to let Hamas rule here, you got to make a political solution for people that they can hear and understand. What do you want? Who do you want to rule there? Who do you want to be the sovereign there? My claim is Israel can be the sovereign, but not everybody in Israel agrees to that yet at all.
Yeah, I mean, not everybody agrees. And I think that what Israel has failed to do so far is to bring some other alternative, a regional alternative, Arab forces, some Palestinian alternative, or some international force. None of that exists. And if we want to achieve our military aims, our strategic aims, then that is probably what we need to do. I don't believe that it is in our long-term benefit to be doing it, but to get rid of Hamas, I think that there's no other real way of doing it, because as long as UNRWA exists in Gaza, and as long as Hamas has the monopoly on the distribution of food, all of the international aid that comes in, and as long as they are paying the salaries to local workers in Gaza, they run the Gaza Strip, and we will not have completed our goals. And it's a pretty simple situation. And I think that once the situation up north kind of calms down a bit, and Israeli troops will be relieved from that combat duty and will have more troops available, that will probably be the next thing that the IDF will be tasked with doing. So far, there's still too much fighting in other fronts, and the IDF simply doesn't have the available resources. But
let's watch. Jonathan, let's just watch 48 seconds of Channel 12's report on what Gazan Arabs told reporter Ohad Chemo. It's just 48 seconds, but it really gives us an amazing sense of what Arabs in Gaza are thinking.
والله فرحت لما قتلت الصنوار اللي دمر وقتل اطفالنا. والله العظيم زغرتت، والله العظيم زغرتت. الحمد لله. ان شاء الله بتمحوهم، ان شاء الله بتمحوهم. ضلكوا وراهم لغايه ما تقتلوهم. سيبنا بيوتنا دمروها عروسهم. يا ربي تلقاهم القصه ال 15 من اليهود. اليهود احسن
الله ونعم الوكيل.
هذه النكبة الله يكتبهم، الله ما يحكم معهم، يا رب يقتلوهم اليهود، يا اليهود أحسن منهم، اليهود بعطونا أكل وبعطونا الدنيا وبيعملوا الدنيا وبعطونا الطريق بأمنة وإيش يفضح أرضهم الحماس.
Unbelievable video that Channel 12 brought. What do you think about that?
I think tremendous work by Ohad Chemo. I've shared it myself, and I think it's so important for international journalists, editors, opinion makers, and elected and appointed officials to see this. And of course, within the boundaries of one journalistic report, but really to see this and get an understanding of, well, maybe the situation in Gaza isn't what we're being told on CNN, Sky, BBC, and MSNBC. Maybe it's a more complex situation where the Palestinians actually don't like Hamas and they want to be freed from the tyranny from almost 20 years of Hamas oppression. Maybe Palestinians understand that what Hamas has done is to bring destruction upon them without asking their permission. And maybe the ones that are to be blamed for this entire horrible situation of human suffering is Hamas and not Israel. So many times people around the world, especially in the West, have this very odd way of confusing between cause and effect and really shifting blame on Israel when really Israel is only defending itself. Yes, Israel is stronger and more powerful than all of its enemies and therefore can inflict more damage on enemy territory. But we aren't the ones who started it. We're just defending ourselves against aggression. And the ones that should be paying the price and the ones that should be held accountable are the ones that started it. And in this case, Hamas. And I think what Ohad Chemo brings forward is a very authentic and trustworthy, and I know Ohad personally, and I know how he works. I think it's a very authentic and trustworthy coverage of a glimpse into Palestinian society, the despair and the horrors of the consequences of Hamas's actions. And it's super important for people around the world to see it. So that's Gaza in a nutshell. And if we
right, so the question I asked you before, and you're still answering it, is what's the report card? What's our credit rating of Israel on the if writ large? If we kind of take the 10,000 foot outlook. Okay, so Gaza, you're saying your point about Gaza was we have it somewhat in hand. We've beaten back Hamas. They still have the hostages, but we have not issued a clear alternative to Hamas rule.
Yes, and while we have defeated Hamas militarily, by and large, and taken away all of their substantial military capabilities, and we've done so and paid in the most important currency that exists, our soldiers' blood and the sacrifices that they have made, our brave soldiers on the field. They have been tremendous, and I think they've overcome significant odds. Many people around the world, including renowned American and British military experts, were advising Israel, don't do it, don't go into Gaza, don't fight. It's going to be so difficult for you and you won't be able to penetrate their defenses and the tunnels, etc., etc. And they explained to us that it was an exercise in futility, to which we replied, well, we have no other choice. We have to go in, and we do believe that we are capable of defeating Hamas, and we will defeat Hamas. And I think that is now what the brave men and women under the IDF leadership have done. And now what we need is, the final twist, which will be the political and diplomatic solution to really bring change into Gaza and to usher in hope for the future, hope for Israelis and hope for Gazans. But as long as Hamas and UNRWA are in place, we're not going to see anything really positive happening in Gaza. Now, if we move on to Lebanon, so a lot, if we were to have had this conversation, Yishai, let's say 8 months into the war, 9 or 10 months into the war, I would have said totally different things. But ever since the elimination of Ismail Haniyeh, and then afterwards the Beeper attack, the very successful Beeper attack that Israel did against the senior leadership and the most important military levels of Hezbollah. Since then, it's been event after event and operation after operation, which has led to an effective strike on Hezbollah's capabilities, their chain of command, their tactical capabilities, their ability to fight and fire rockets, and really to conduct.
And yet today, Israel was. My kids showed me a picture of the rocket threats throughout Israel today. The map was covered with red dots.
Indeed.
Israel was under fire today. The north was practically shut down.
Indeed, and my family, myself, we were in bomb shelters 4 times only today, and we live in central Israel.
You were in bomb shelters today.
Yeah, definitely not a normal occurrence. So I say that, and I'll explain why this is happening. First, I mean, and an important point about that is that it's mostly Hezbollah has been reduced to psychological warfare, very much similar to what Hamas was reduced to when it comes to triggering alarms. Yes, there were impacts in Israel, and there were a little bit more than 20 that were wounded in Israel, and also, by the way, Palestinians. By the way, an interesting event is that Palestinians tried to claim that there was an explosion in Tulkarem, which was a result of an incoming rocket or an Israeli interceptor, when in fact it has become apparent, according to Israeli security sources, that this was an accident, and an IED, an improvised explosive device, went off in Tulkarem, leading to 12 Palestinians getting wounded. So much more related to terrorism than incoming rockets. But if we go back to the big level of here, the taking stock of the situation, Hezbollah has been, I think, overwhelmed by Israeli tactical military success against it during the last 3 months. It's not a decisive, overwhelming effect. Hezbollah is a strong and robust, well-founded and well-organized organization.
Can we foresee a time where Israelis from the north are moving back home? If not, then what are we talking about? Then we have not reached the strategic goals of this thing.
Yeah, I think we can. And I think that day is nearer today than it was yesterday, because most, if not all, of Hezbollah's infrastructure in southern Lebanon, close to the border, has been dismantled. But the rockets, and I think we have to be really honest here, even if Israel is able to take away all of Hezbollah's infrastructure in southern Lebanon beyond what we've done now, beyond 5 kilometers or 3 miles, and we go 7 miles in, or perhaps 10 miles in, or even all the way up to the Litani River. At the end of that, even if we do that, and that will come at a heavy military price in casualties and expenses, even then, Hezbollah will still have the ability to fire rockets at northern Israel and probably central Israel. In order for us to be able to live in total security without any rockets being fired at Israel, very drastic measures have to be taken. I don't think that those measures are currently on the table. Speaking of, maneuvering 40, 50, 60 kilometers into Lebanon and decimating everything on the way, maybe that's in the cards for the future. I would actually propose a different, more indirect approach. And this goes to the bigger strategic picture. If we take stock of the situation, I think that most of what can be achieved militarily has already been achieved with regards to Hamas and Hezbollah. But the bottom line is that until we actually make sure that they won't be able to replenish and rebuild their capabilities at the end of the fighting, until that happens, we're just going to see them rebuild themselves and fight again. Now, how can we do so? If we go to the source. The source of Hezbollah isn't Lebanese taxpayers, and the source and the strength of Hamas doesn't come from Palestinian taxpayers, even though Hamas taxes them very effectively and they use international aid as well. The source of all of the weapons, the money, the political guidance, and the extremism comes from the Islamic Republic of Iran. And until we in Israel deal with that horrible, tyrannical, and violent regime in Tehran, about 900 miles away from where we are, then I don't think that we will really know quiet and stability. Right. Maybe Israelis will be able to go back to their homes, but we won't be able to live here in stability and in relative security. So what we need to be doing is shifting the strategy and focusing on what's about 900 miles away from here, because until that is settled and until they are held accountable for their acts of aggression against Israel, and until they, the Iranian regime, are persuaded by the use of Israeli military capabilities and other capabilities that it's simply not worth it to continue to attack Israel, they will continue to attack Israel. They'll continue to fund all our enemies, and they're very prolific, they're very creative in providing weapons to Palestinian terrorists in Judea and Samaria. They're very prolific in destabilizing Jordan. They're doing it, they've done it in Syria, they've done it in Lebanon, they've done it in Yemen, and I'm sure that they will look for other places to do it as long as we don't stop them. So the bottom line here, if we really take stock of our current situation, is that I think we are in a shift. What should be a strategic shift from military operations along our borders against the weaker links of the Iranian axis of evil, Hamas, which has almost been decimated, and Hezbollah, which has been significantly degraded but not beaten yet. But all of that is tactical details, and it will not matter very much at the end of the war if we don't shift towards the center of gravity of enemy activity, and that is Iran.
Okay, so you've spoken of the front in Gaza, you've spoken of the front in Lebanon, and you've made it clear towards the end that the real bigger front is the head of the octopus, which is the Iranian regime. You didn't go so far as to say that we're going to work towards regime change. Rather, you use the kind of language that they'll, learn that it's not worth it. But one could understand that at the end, that regime is oppressive to its people, and it's got a lot of internal protest from within. And regime change would be good for Iran. It would be good for our whole region. But yet, there's another front, and that's why I'm so happy that you're on today, Jonathan Conricus. Is the front that we fight against forces that are anti-Israel. Could you call them jihadists? Well, not exactly. But these forces include things like the ICC. And the ICC, the International Criminal Court at The Hague, supposedly the world's top war crimes court, issued arrest warrants on Thursday for Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and his former defense minister, Gallant, accusing them of crimes against humanity. The warrant said there's reason to believe that Netanyahu and Defense Minister Gallant used starvation as a method of warfare and have targeted civilians on purpose while trying to fight Hamas. And so the criminal court issued real arrest warrants. Like in theory, if Prime Minister Netanyahu flies to France, he could be taken into custody. And therefore undermining the legitimacy of our claim that we're fighting a just war, that we're trying to minimize casualties, and also feed the population of Gaza to the tune of 900 million tons of food in the last 13 months. This other front, the International Criminal Court, the international opinion, how is Israel fighting that? How are we going to push back on this ICC arrest warrant thing?
Yeah, so that's why I started with saying that, first we covered reality on the ground, but sometimes, sadly, the virtual fake reality is more important than the real reality on the ground. Real reality is that Israel was attacked, as you said so eloquently in the beginning. Israel didn't want this war. Israel didn't start it. And therefore, we shouldn't, of course, be held accountable for what's happening, and definitely not in such a perverse way. But for many people, it doesn't matter, the cause and effect, and it doesn't matter who started. It doesn't matter who really has genocidal intent, which is what our enemies have against us. If the pictures are worse on the Palestinian side, then we must be the ones that are to be blamed. And that's a perverse situation. Israel is fighting on 7 kinetic fronts, active fronts as we speak, and we are fighting 2 additional fronts, international media warfare and lawfare. I would say 9 fronts. The last 2, they're interconnected and they feed off each other, but it is a very, very important battle. It is loaded with anti-Semitism. It is loaded with bias and unfair judgment against Israel. It is an uneven playing field, which I have been in for quite a lot of years. And I would say that it is an almost unwinnable situation because there are so many tremendous powers that are stacked up against Israel. I can only say that I am so very grateful that we have the support of our biggest and most important ally, the United States of America, standing beside Israel, supporting Israel, protecting Israel diplomatically, and providing Israel also with the ability to, with the arms it needs to defend ourselves. Now, the situation is one where I think, having said that it's almost unwinnable, I'd say the following, and I don't know if you will agree, Yishai, but I think that many of our viewers will. I think that we in Israel, for political reasons, are not allocating the relevant resources, talent, money, and priorities in fighting this war in a way that it is good for Israel. I think that we should be investing much more talent, people, money, other resources, priority, intelligence, and time and creativity in fighting this war, because it is a very important war, which sometimes is even more important than what our brave men and women do on the battlefield. And I think that for far too long, Israel has not invested enough money and resources and priorities in international media and in lawfare and in the court of public opinion, global public opinion. And now, unfortunately, we are also suffering from it. And to kind of give you an example of a positive example of exactly what Israel is capable of, and I think you and I share that belief in Israel's amazing capacity to do the impossible, to accomplish the impossible with the hard work, with the belief, with the ingenuity and the creativity of Am Israel. For 40, 50 years ago, Israel was a country that was on the verge of running out of water. Today, we are a regional water superpower that deals in water in order to promote our national security interest. That didn't come out of nowhere. It came out of a political decision to prioritize that asset, water, and then came legislation, education, investment, and long-term strategic focus, national focus across the board. Everybody in Israel knew that we have to take care of that asset called water, because if we don't recycle, and if we don't be early adopters of new technologies like desalination and other things, and if we don't educate people not to waste, and if we don't transfer the water effectively, then we won't have it. And today, we did all those things successfully, which is an example of how Israel can overcome tremendous and challenging odds. And what we're facing internationally is tremendously challenging odds. But I think we can do it if we set our minds to it. And I hope that the Israeli government now and in the future will prioritize it, because we are suffering. And if there's one front that worries me most, it is not what our brave men and women on the battlefield are facing against Hezbollah or against Hamas. We are defeating them on the battlefield because our fighters are better, they are braver, they're smarter, they're more creative, they're led better, and they have better equipment, and they're better organized. All of that on the military level is pretty clear, especially when you take stock of the situation today. Where we are not doing well enough and where we aren't fighting well enough is in the court of public opinion and in lawfare against us, where we need to be as creative and as brilliant as we can be in so many other things. And I think we have to really shift our strategy and to do much more. There's lots of good people out there. You're one of them who speaks on behalf of Am Israel and does a lot of good work in sharing truth and spreading information firsthand from Israel for people who care to see. But the state of Israel has to do so much more, has to communicate better, and has to really focus its assets on it. Otherwise, I think that we will be paying a horrible price, one that I don't think that we can pay. And I think that we should totally shift our strategy. And I think that it is possible. This isn't a doomsday prophecy where it's all everybody hates us and the world is full of anti-Semites. which might be the case, but I think we can still influence the situation.
Jonathan Conricus, you are a great narrative warrior, and Israel's lucky to have you, and we thank you very much for your time. And I think you've given us two conceptual shifts today. One is that the war has to go to Iran, one way or the other, because at the end, that's the head of the snake. That's the thing that is motivating these other proxies. And the other thing is a change in Israeli strategic thinking about what I call the narrative war, both what you call lawfare and court of public opinion. We need to put another layer, another level, totally different strategic kind of level in order to fight this war. But really, you are one of the top people, and you will continue to advise Israeli leadership also in this battle. God bless you, and thank you so much for joining us today.
You too. Thank you, Yishai. Thanks for having me. Shalom.
All right. Jonathan Conricus is really one of the people who is doing great work, and you saw it here on the Yishai Fleischer TV show. Thank you very much. All right, folks. Wow, that was a lot of fun and intense for me out there. And if you believe what Jonathan Conricus said, which is that Israel's got to double down, if not more, on the narrative war and to fight it, help us in any way that you can to fight the narrative war, because that's what we're doing here. That's what my team and I are doing with the help of God at Yishai Fleischer TV and our other channels. We're trying to fight the narrative war for Israel. And that's what we have been called to reserve duty, to IDF duty. That's our duty, is to fight the narrative war. So please go to buymeacoffee.com/Yishai. Easy enough. And if you want to see the land of Israel beautified, if you want that Torah spread to the world, if you want to plant trees in the land of Israel, if you want to see new tractors all over the land of Israel, farming and beautifying, be part of our various projects that can be found at a website whose name I came up with because God put it in my head and I love it so much, fightforisrael.org. Fight for Israel. Just wear the t-shirt. I fight for Israel. We got to make these t-shirts. I fight for Israel. It's so simple. Fight for Israel. I love that, because when you fight for Israel, you pray for Israel. When you fight for Israel, you love for Israel. And of course, I have that new word I came up with, which is beautified. We got to beautify. We got to fight. We got to beautify for the land of Israel. Fightforisrael.org. Easy enough. Finally, I have the great, unbelievable merit to work for the mamas and the papas, the tomb of the patriarchs and matriarchs in the beautiful and ancient city of Hebron. Hebron is the seat of this amazing structure, an amazing tomb, amazing shrine of Genesis. And learn more about it at hebronfund.org. Visit, check out our pictures, our movies, and learn more about it and connect, come and visit it. And of course, you could support the continued effort to resettle and rebuild ancient Hebron and protect the tomb of the patriarchs and matriarchs. Very finally, you can write me an email, yishai@yishaifleischer.com. I get a lot of emails, and I'm going to try to respond. But if it's really important and burning in your heart, please go to yishai@yishaifleischer.com. That's it. Blessings from the land of blessings. Lots of love. Thank you so much for being with me. Please do a little thing for yourself. Subscribe, hit that little bell, be part of our network. We're just doing our best to broadcast the land of Israel and the light of Israel, the light of Jerusalem. So you can be part of that very easily. We also have our weekly MP3 podcast, which is there. It's free. It's easy to connect to, and it helps you prepare for the Sabbath and helps turn your heart towards Yerushalayim. God bless you, folks, wherever you are. Thanks again to my team, Yo, and David and Malka and the rest of the team that helps us get the light out to the world. God bless you, folks, wherever you are. Lots of love and lots of blessings, and shalom.